This is our period of evening meditation on this Sunday, May 16th, 1954, in the chapel on Sunrise Ranch. And we thank God for the privilege of gathering together to share in the spirit of peace, the spirit of understanding, and realization. You will recall that on a number of occasions I have drawn your attention to the Milky Way. That great galaxy of which our solar system, and consequently this Earth, is a small part. I have been waiting for something of an official report of the developments in the consciousness of astronomers as a result of the Mount Wilson Observatory, where some little time ago, you will recall, the world's largest telescope with a 100-inch lens was installed. Perhaps you know something of the story of that lens. It is really a fascinating story of a dream and how over a period of many years efforts had been made to establish a larger lens for a telescope which would permit human beings to peer visually further into the depths of space. And how, in this particular case, when work was finally undertaken, the first lens cooled a little too rapidly and cracked, and had to be discarded, and the whole process started over again. How it took literally months to cool that one piece of glass, the problems they had in pouring a piece of glass that large, and how it was poured in a mold electrically controlled so that the reduction in heat through the mass could be gradually reduced, and so that at the edges where it was thinnest it could be kept at a temperature equal to that of the interior, or the center of the great lens. Many factors which were in themselves a challenge to man's ingenuity. How finally it was carried on a freight car to its destination. The problems of setting the lens in the giant telescope and all the rest. It has been quite a long time since I read the article giving these details, and I've always been very much interested as to what, if anything, astronomers were learning or had learned by the use of this great lens. In the June issue of Coronet, which just reached me this evening, I found an article which to me was very interesting. And I thought perhaps you would like to share tonight in a little meditation on this remarkable article entitled The Milky Way, Mysterious Marvel by Norman and Madeline Carlyle. On the next star-studded night, look up at the luminous band of white that we call the Milky Way, and ponder the fact that it is actually a diadem of blazing suns. We've done that, haven't we? We've paused to consider that fact. But here is the statement. And ponder the fact that it is actually a diadem of blazing suns, more than 100 billion of them. How much is a billion? 1,000 million, isn't it? And how much is a million? It's 1,000,000. 1,000,000,000 multiplied 100 times. More than 100 billion of them. Awed as you may be, your own feelings will be small compared with those of the astronomers whose telescopes, cameras, and other probing instruments have been trained on this fantastic galaxy of which our own Earth is but a tiny part. The Milky Way, our own star-spangled island in the black emptiness of space, is a marvel of the heavens whose majesty keeps growing as new revelations about it pour in from our observatories. At least there's a growing consciousness. I question the wording here just slightly, although I do not doubt but what the marvels are growing in this galaxy. But it's man's consciousness of that which already is, which is growing. For, as its baffling mysteries have been solved one by one, and I would reword that a bit, for, as a few of its baffling mysteries have been solved one by one, it has become a cosmic springboard that has launched sweeping discoveries about the universe in which we live. These new disclosures reached a stirring climax in 1952 when Dr. Walter Baade of Mount Wilson and Palomar stood before a gathering of world-famed astronomers in Rome. What he had to say was the unexpected denouement is, there's a word that I can't, denouement, whatever, statement, I suppose. It's strange to my vocabulary. It isn't very often I hit one. Unexpected declaration or statement of a detective story that began in the Milky Way and ended in the farthest reaches of space. Again, I think we need to modify slightly. A detective story that began in the Milky Way and ended in the farthest reaches of space, to which man's perceptions have been able to penetrate beyond the vision of even the giant telescope on Mount Palomar. Our ideas of the already frightening distances of space would have to change, Dr. Bard announced. Our measurements of distances to the stars had been wrong, wildly wrong. Where science had reckoned the distance to faraway galaxies to be 1,000,000 light years, it was actually 2,000,000. Now, what is a light year? Are you all clear on that? A light year? A light year is the distance that it takes light to travel in the distance that light travels in 1 year at a speed of 186,000 miles a second. Now calculate how many seconds there are in a year, and then multiply that by 186,000, and you'll have the number of miles signified by 1 light year. Then multiply that by 2,000,000, and if your mind is capable of grasping such a staggering distance, you will have some concept, at least, of what they're talking about here. It was actually 2,000,000. Where it was calculated to be 100,000,000, it was really 200,000,000 light years. Our universe, incredibly vast as it had seemed, said Dr. Bard, is at least 8 times as big in volume as man had dared dream. This pronouncement was rivaled in its impact by the earlier discovery that the Milky Way is a stage upon which is being enacted a sequel to the drama of creation. For in our galaxy, astronomers have found evidence that creation did not stop in some prodigious moment billions of years ago. Now, at last, there's a scientific recognition of that marvelous fact. It's something that I've been emphasizing to you over the years. For in our galaxy, astronomers have found evidence that creation did not stop in some prodigious moment billions of years ago. It is going on now. Emphasis on the now. At this very moment, new stars, new suns, even planets destined to be inhabited by creatures like us may be coming into being. Now, isn't that a marvelous recognition? To me, it isn't surprising, but it's certainly delightful to realize that there are those on the face of the earth who are beginning to realize it. The astronomer sees the Milky Way as a gigantic flattened disk, so huge that to cross it from one side to the other at the speed of light, more than 186,000 miles a second, would take 100,000 years. Now, this is just about our own galaxy, the Milky Way, that of which we are a part. These other galaxies that we were talking about a few moments ago are not a part of this galaxy. They're 100 million light years away, they say, or 2. That 2 is very important if we're going to comprehend it. But with respect to our own whole, our own part, of the cosmos. It is pictured here as a gigantic flattened disk, so huge that to cross it from one side to the other at the speed of light, which is to say, more than 186,000 miles a second, would take 100,000 years. That's quite a distance. When you have some spare time sometime, your mathematics are working good, figure it out. Inside this great wheel are those swarming, inside this great wheel are those swarming 100 billion stars. This is our own galaxy, remember. Not some other galaxy 100 million light years away. This is our own. Inside this great wheel are those swarming 100 billion stars. Some tiny ones, a fraction the size of our sun. Some giants, 1/2 billion times larger than our sun. In other words, 500 million suns like our own, to make the size of one of the stars or suns out of this 100 billion in our own galaxy. There are old stars and new ones, red stars, blue stars. You know, the authors missed a point there. There are old stars and new ones, red stars and blue ones. Hot stars and cold stars. And note this, and invisible mystery stars no one has ever seen. Between them is space. Between all these billions, or millions, and billions it says, of stars, between them is space. Now, in our classwork, we have been considering the fact that between the cells of the body there is space, haven't we? Or has that been drawn to your attention? Space. A great deal of space in your body. So much space that Bart J. Bach, the Harvard astronomer who has devoted his life to studying the Milky Way, says that in it could readily be stored 1,000,000 times as many stars as there are, without much chance of any of them colliding. He figures there could be 1,000,000 times more than this in the same space without much chance that any of them would collide. Now, we have noticed that with respect to all matter, there is space between the particles which make up the body of that substance. And we see that here, whether it's the physical body with its cells, or the body of the universe, shall we say, this galaxy, the Milky Way, with all of its 100 billion blazing suns. This whole system rotates endlessly around a central spot that is like the hub of a wheel. So huge is the galaxy that, though the speed of this rotation of the galaxy itself, the huge wheel, though the speed of this rotation is more than 9,000 miles a minute, not an hour or a day, but the speed of the rotation of the galaxy itself is more than 9,000 miles a minute. Now, our Earth is revolving around our Sun at a speed that requires 1 year to complete the circuit. But while it is revolving around the Sun, and the Sun is revolving around something else, this whole is contained in a wheel that is moving at a speed of 9,000 miles a minute. Now you need to have your thinking caps on. Though the speed of this rotation is more than 9,000 miles a minute, at the distance our Sun lies from the hub, that's in our area. Further out, it would be faster, wouldn't it? Nearer the center, the speed would be reduced. Though we're traveling 9,000 miles a minute at the distance our Sun lies from the hub, it takes more than 200 million years for this wheel to complete a single revolution. $200 million years, moving at 9,000 miles a minute, for this wheel to complete a single revolution. Now this gives you some idea of the reason why I've drawn your attention to the Milky Way on occasion. A single cosmic year in the life of the Milky Way. 200 million years. And as it turns, this whole stellar merry-go-round is also hurtling through space towards some nameless destination in the cosmos. Now, do you see some wheels within wheels? Our Earth revolving around the Sun, our Sun in its own movement inside of the galaxy itself revolving at 9,000 miles a minute on a pattern that requires how long? 200 million years for a single revolution. And then this whole thing is moving with tremendous speed in relationship to other galaxies around another central spot somewhere. This other central spot that forms the center of the galaxies is what I refer to as the central sun of suns, for the want of a better name. For many years, our Sun was believed to be very near the center of the Milky Way. Then astronomer Harlow Shapley, using the Mount Wilson telescope to probe the mysteries of the strange globular clusters of the stars in the galaxy, made the astonishing discovery that 1/3 of all these clusters were packed into only 4% of the sky. What could it mean? The young astronomer and other scientists could reach only one conclusion. The spot where the clusters were massed together must be near the center of the galaxy. Shapley had done for the Milky Way. Now there's for our consciousness with respect to the Milky Way. He hadn't done a thing to the Milky Way. Or for it. Shapley had done for the Milky Way. That sounds so absurd to me. Shapley had done for our consciousness of the Milky Way what how do you pronounce Copernicus? Copernicus had done for the solar system, or had done with respect to a consciousness of the solar system. Copernicus had shattered all previous astronomical ideas by showing that the Earth was not the center of the solar system. Now Shapley had changed the picture of the Milky Way. Now he changed our picture of it by showing that our sun, far from being at its center, is actually located near the edge of the great rotating disk. Around the turn of the century, astronomers had discovered stars like lighthouses in the sky, stars whose real brightness could be determined. Previously, they had been hampered by the fact that they never knew whether a star was bright because it was closer or because it was bigger. These Cepheids, or pulsating stars, solved that problem because scientists knew that a Cepheid that looked dimmer was really farther away. Now, they don't explain how the scientists knew that, but we'll assume that they are right. This was the method young Shapley had put to work, using Cepheids which he knew to be 2,700 times brighter than our sun. As reference points, he was able to measure distances in the vast reaches of space. When Dr. Edwin Hubble started probing another area, the great nebula in Andromeda, he found 12 of these blinking stars there. Judging by their apparent brightness, he calculated the distance to this galaxy to be 900,000 light years. There was something strange about the great nebula, however, something that worried Hubble. I almost read that hubby. The globular clusters did not seem to be as bright as he thought those in the Milky Way would look at that distance. 2 decades after Hubble's studies, the mystery was still unsolved. America was at war, and Los Angeles was dimmed out. Far above the great shadowy city, Dr. Baud went to work at Mount Wilson Observatory, knowing that for the first time, the 100-inch telescope, then the world's largest, would not be affected by the glow of the city lights, which otherwise interfered with exacting photographs. Sure enough, something different did show up on the plates, something that astronomers had not known existed. The photograph showed what appeared to be 2 stellar populations. Since each contained Cepheids, doubts arose as to whether the Cepheids in the 2 populations really had the same candle power. For the first time it became questionable whether those stars which had been depended upon for distant measurement could be trusted. It's not a question of trusting the stars, it's a matter of trusting man's comprehension of the stars. Baud's suspicions had to wait for confirmation until the 200-inch, and this was, I think I said a while ago, the 100-inch. I meant the 200-inch telescope that was mounted at Mount Palomar. The 200-inch Hale telescope on Mount Palomar was ready to search the great nebula. As it scanned this galaxy, Bud could only report himself stunned by what he saw. That's why it's taken them so long to say anything. There were two populations of stars. All right. Or that was true. Population 2, the kind Shapley had spotted in the Milky Way, was 2,700 times brighter than the Sun, and 4 times fainter than Hubble's. And population 1, 10,800 times brighter than the Sun, the stars which Hubble had used to determine the distance of the Andromeda Nebula. Since these Cepheid stars in Andromeda looked so faint, yet were actually so much brighter, it could mean only one thing: they were farther away. Now, as far as I'm concerned, these conclusions should be held subject to revision, shall we say. But presumably, they have determined that the stars Hubble was examining in population 1 are 10,800 times brighter than our Sun. Not just a little farther, calculations quickly showed, but twice as far. That was the news that Bud imparted to the astronomers in Rome. Since Andromeda and other constellations are twice as far away as supposed, then the universe is 8 times as big in volume as we had thought. Theories on the deepest mystery of the sky, whether new stars are still being born and how, have changed with dramatic suddenness. Hints that once accepted ideas were antiquated had been piling up for half a century. Hints that once accepted ideas were antiquated had been piling up for half a century. Finally, it got so top-heavy they had to let go. Actually, the first hint, although no one recognized it then, had come in the late 18th century, when Sir William Herschel, in his early studies of the Milky Way, observed that there seemed to be great empty black spaces containing no stars at all. One of them was so intensely black and oddly shaped that it was termed the coal sack. It takes brilliant imagination to think of that. Later, when astronomers started using the spectroscope, the device which breaks down light and reveals which element is giving it off, they got another hint. Strange lines showed up on the spectrographs, lines indicating the presence of elements that the astronomers knew should not be present on those stars. Could it be that the space they thought to be empty was really filled with tiny dust and gas particles? Complicated calculations eventually seemed to prove this theory to be right, and astronomers reached the conclusion that the 100 billion stars in the Milky Way made up only half the total bulk of the galaxy. The rest is composed of dust and gas particles. In spots where the dust is concentrated, clouds of these particles blot out the stars and explain at last those strange blank spots like the coal sack. If it were not for the clouds of dust that hide them, we would see twice as many stars in the Milky Way as we do. Yet other secrets of the Milky Way have yielded to a powerful new tool that sees invisible stars. It is the radio telescope, a device that collects the strange radio waves from space. As its operators checked their first results, they made an historic announcement. The Milky Way is full of radio wave sources that are totally invisible. Interesting, isn't it? The Milky Way is full of radio wave sources that are totally invisible. As new radio telescopes have swept the sky, astronomers have discovered many of these invisible stars which give off radio waves. At first, however, they had no idea what these dark stars might look like. Now, isn't it interesting that they call them dark stars merely because they can't see them? At first, however, they had no idea what these dark stars might look like. But now a stunning answer has come from Jodrell Bank Experiment Station, home of the world's biggest radio telescope in Manchester, England. Using a new method, astronomers there have succeeded in detecting several of these radio stars, they call them. Their studies reveal that if we could see them, and the others which must be like them, the Milky Way would blaze forth with dazzling splendor. For these stars, the astronomers report, are incredibly big, thousands of times bigger than visible stars. They have discovered that the invisible stars are thousands of times bigger than the visible stars. That's interesting. So big are these stars that they might appear to us as large as a full moon, even though they are so far away. It is probable that we will never see these dark monsters. That makes me shudder at man's incomprehension. Why should these so-called radio stars, or invisible stars, be called dark monsters? Merely because we can't see them. But they are convinced that they are there. And the largest of the stars in our galaxy are invisible. Thousands of times bigger than the visible stars. I thought perhaps this would help you to a deeper realization of what I mean when I talk about the visible and the invisible realms. It should. It is probable that we will never see these dark monsters, but scientists hope that new instruments will help solve the riddle of what they are like and what they mean. Thousands of years ago, the Greeks called the Milky Way the road to the palace of heaven. Today, it has indeed become a roadway leading scientists to new knowledge of our universe. Now, I suppose that this article must surely leave you with a sense of something incomplete. Because certain things are touched upon without any particularized development of the significance of the point. Just an idea stuck there in consciousness. One such idea is this one about populations 1 and 2 in the galaxy. Now, note this, that the concept of populations 1 and 2 in the galaxy are established with respect to visible stars, not the invisible ones. But the populations 1 and 2 are with respect to visible stars. Now, it occurred to me to wonder, and it isn't for me at the moment at least to undertake to make a dissertation on this subject, but it occurred to me to wonder, could it be that the scientists are observing in the realm of what they classify as populations 1 and 2, the evidences of the positive and negative aspects which would correlate to the male and female formations in the realm of the galaxies? I might suggest that I suspect something of that sort. There's not much use of attempting to compel the mind to grasp these concepts of great distance. Distance is, as mankind thinks of it, a very misleading factor in the equation essential to understanding. For distance is a completely relative thing. Man, hampered by his own smallness, not only physically but mentally, feels that he must measure everything on the basis of his concepts of distance as he has established them with respect to the measurement of surface factors on this earth. And yet distance is a relative thing. If we attempt to conceive of distance on the basis that man uses here, we develop a completely distorted concept or picture with respect to the cosmos. For distance as man sees it is not distance as God sees it. Let us remember that all of these things are relative. And in actual fact, while I would not deny in any way the vastness of the universe, nor detract one iota from its greatness, that vastness is something which is no greater to the beings who function in relationship to it than the distances on the earth's surface are great to us. Now, if you will bear that in mind, I think it will make it easier for you to comprehend some of the significant factors in this pattern of meditation. For the distances in the galaxy itself which is conceived to be 100,000 light years in diameter, are no greater from the standpoint of the beings who function consciously in relationship to those distances than are the distances to us on the surface of the earth. We say, I need an airplane, good weather, proper fuel, and 10 hours, or thereabouts, between 9 and 10 hours, to travel the distance from here to 100 Mile House. A distance which, by way of Ogden, Utah, is approximately 1,430 air miles. And if we say 10 hours, elapsed time to cover that distance, we have 10 times 60, or 600 minutes, or 60 times that, which would make how many seconds? About 36,000? Is that right? 36,000 seconds for me to travel by plane from here to 100 Mile House. 36,000 seconds. Well, now light traveling at 186,000 miles, and how long? Well, you figure it out. The point is that while these distances are vast and the body of God is great, and all of this is a part of the body of God, man is supposed to provide the intelligent factor, the intelligent sharing, working factor, the directing, controlling factor of the body of God on earth. Man, 2 billion men and women. They say there are more than that now. 2 billion, that's close enough. 2 billion men and women are supposed to provide the intelligent, controlling, working factor of the body of God on earth. But once we begin to comprehend ourselves as a part of the body of God, and begin to establish a level of consciousness that recognizes the correlating factors here, we begin to realize that the body of God is not all head any more than you are all head. You have a great toe. You have feet. You have other parts of the body which do not particularly focalize the centering of consciousness. The same is true in the body of God. We see these levels worked out, if we once stop to meditate upon the matter. They are worked out in relationship to the surface manifestations of the earth from the standpoint of the kingdoms of the earth. Man, the human kingdom, the animal kingdom. We could say the fowl or bird kingdom, the fish kingdom, the insect kingdom, the gas kingdom, which includes the air, the envelope of atmosphere in which we live, and the mineral kingdom. All of these different kingdoms providing different factors in the body of God right here. And we still could explore the realm of the mineral kingdom more extensively from the standpoint of the earth itself. And if the earth itself is conceived to be a planet, a visible planet, we can perceive the fact that there is a larger invisible planet which relates to this particular part of the solar system. For with respect to every visible sun, there is what we might call the invisible counterpart. With respect to every planet that is conceived to be visible, there is the invisible counterpart. And this is not to be confused with the populations 1 and 2 idea, for that is with respect to the visible aspects in a particular realm or level of form and of consciousness to perceive that form, where I suggested the possibility of the positive and negative aspects of form. But in addition to this, we have the vast bodies of which are invisible forms insofar as our particular ability to perceive is concerned at this level of consciousness with respect to what we conceive to be form. For there certainly is form beyond the range of our ability to perceive form. And yet, by instrumentation, we are, it appears, scientifically determining that there is form where man did not know there was form in the universe. And that the invisible forms are larger or more vast in scope and area than the visible forms. Well, that correlates with the basic factors which you have been considering in our training school program, for instance, and our whole background of study in the Third Sacred School. And I trust that this meditation upon the scientific findings and conclusions and ideas will have value to you in relationship to the development of your ability to perceive and comprehend the factors which are at work in relationship to ourselves from the standpoint of what we have consistently called the visible and the invisible realms of being. In meditating upon the cosmos, let us not be arrogant. Let us not waste time trying to comprehend concepts of vast distances. For the ability of the mind to comprehend is staggered by such things. It is not the vast distance, nor yet is it the cosmos itself upon which we need to meditate. For if we begin to think of the cosmos, we at once back down, as it were, to the universe. And even here we must be careful not to be arrogant and presumptuous. We need to be careful of conclusion and to avoid meaningless imagination. Therefore, while we note the vast splendor and something of the principles there revealed, we back down to the solar system. And even here we need to be careful not to be arrogant and presumptuous. For who among the children of men can comprehend all the mysteries of our solar system, the sister planets of our Earth, and the sun around which we revolve? And while we may meditate upon some of the things which we see there, we avoid fantastic conclusions and back down to the earth upon which we live. And even here, who among us can say that he has comprehended all the mysteries of the earth itself? And while we may see and know many things, we come back to ourselves as human beings. And who can say that he comprehends all the mysteries of his own body, to say nothing of his mind and his heart? And so we find that there are layers of mystery, layers of wonder upon wonder. And here, where we have a centering in consciousness, we can meet the Spirit of the One, yea, and of the ones who have a centering in consciousness with respect to the solar system. And those who have a centering in consciousness with respect to the universe. And through them we know we have contact with those who have a centering of consciousness in the cosmos. But rather than seeking through vain imagination to comprehend some supposed mystery in these vast fields of being, let us be content to trust those who provide the centering of consciousness in these vast fields, and make certain that we ourselves in our fields provide the correct centering of consciousness at the places where we are in relationship to the whole. So let it be, and so shall we serve, to the glory of God and to the blessing of the children of man.